So this is Baruch Fleischman here. I'm at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel, and this is a tremendous atlas that we have here of Jewish history. This is Jewish medieval history, or from the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. What happened to the Jews? Question is that as you look at our history from our standpoint right now, do we understand that we're still here, living in the lands of people who, let's say, hate us? And where are those lands? Those lands are basically Europe, which the rabbis say is really an extension of ancient Rome, which ancient Rome is really an extension of the place of a country which is called Edom, which was established by the children of our brother Esau. We also were scattered to the northern rim of the African peninsula and throughout the Middle East in various different places, where we ran into different aspects of the family fight between the firstborn son of Abraham, who is known in Hebrew as Yishmael, who really is the Arabs and those affected specifically by the Arab peoples, who are very jealous and do not really particularly care for the rising uppity Jew. And Jews were given status, a lowly status in the Arab world. They weren't massacred as they were in the Asaph lands, in the lands of Edom, our extension of Rome, and it is the extension of our brother, who is really rather bloodthirsty, as we see from history. Somehow we survive this because we're living amongst people who really want to see us down. That is Asaph, that is Edom, that is our brother. He feels that he has the right to be the firstborn, and here we are, and so therefore that hatred is built over centuries and centuries and became really infested in the Roman Church. But the Roman Church had two different parts. It had a part which is the Western Roman world, which we will get into that more, and also this one we're calling about Byzantium. The Byzantium, let's say, was the original home of Byzantium would have been Istanbul. Today it was Constantinople then. And it spread throughout the northern rim of the Mediterranean, and we extended all the way into Italy, which is the source of really where you have the papal states. You have the Western Romans. So you had this split between two sets of Romans who hated each other. But we're living in the midst of both of them. So the question is how do we survive that? Because one thing that they hated more than anything else was us. Because this Catholicism cannot grow if you have these Jews lying around. They just hang around. So they were persecuted, and now we're beginning to get into what really happens. How, in fact, did we survive? Now, we have maps here. So we're going to go over into the maps, and we'll take a look at them a little bit. He says this is entitled Italy in the Framework of Byzantium and their corresponding enemy, the Holy Roman Empire, which is in the northern part of Italy and then spread through the Germanies, etc. So let's take a little bit of a look at this map and see if we can get down a little bit closer to it and take a look here. What we see here, without getting into the boxes, which really give us some idea of what's going on in specific places at specific times. So we're talking about the 800s and the 900s. And also remember that the tremendous thing that this Dr. HAIM BEINART has done is that there's just not that much. It wasn't such a literate world at that time. So to find these different aspects is quite an effort. So here we have the boot of Israel of Italy. And it gives you an idea, if you're familiar with maps, where here's Serbia and Croatia. So here the Yugoslavian, what I call the Yugoslavian area. So up here, let me see, bring this down a little bit more. We have the Kingdom of Hungary, which at this time is not affiliated with either of the two Roman empires. And so we see that going up, straight up from this split, we'll talk about it in a minute, that the Holy Roman Empire, which is really concerned by the states of the church, spread into France, and it spread into Germany, and like that. So here we see the Western Roman Empire, and in the blue we see the Eastern Roman Empire. Now in other places we have bigger maps. These maps will show you that the blue area, which is the which is Byzantium. He says that actually is the Eastern Roman Empire, spread all the way over to, really had a foothold down here in the bottom of the boat. So it's a very powerful empire, and more than anything else, they hated Jews, always persecuting Jews. So let's see what says over here, what he writes about this period of time. Let me bring us back a little bit so we can see this better. He says, the most important political factors for an understanding of this period are the political status of Byzantium in southern Italy, Rome as the papal seat, and the rise of city-states in the central and northern parts of the Italian peninsula. So we understand that until around the year 1870, Italy was a conglomeration of different states who didn't necessarily like each other and work together, but they were later united. But at this point, we're starting to talk about the beginning of these different states. This situation did not change very much, even after the incorporation of northern Italy into the Holy Roman Empire, nor after the Muslim conquests in southern Italy, because the Muslims came in and they took Sicily, and we're going to see all of that in some of the little boxes that we have here. Combined to rule that so he says a Muslim conquest in southern, and in other words, a number of forces. So the Eastern religious force and the Western religious force meeting right there in Italy with the Muslims at the bottom. Or political, so he says, a religious or political combined to rule Italy, and within this framework lived the Jewish community, often in very difficult circumstances, because when you're in between, and this happens all throughout history in the lands of Europe, is that we're in between the right and the left, or whatever you call it, and they hate each other, and we get killed in the middle. So he says, often in very difficult circumstances. In the struggle of power in southern Italy, the Muslims tried to oust Byzantium and gain a foothold in Europe. From 652 until the 1820s, Italian cities were at the mercy of Muslim bands based mainly in Tunisia. Does this sound familiar? I don't know. And the adjacent islands. Once they engaged in pillaging raids, they would raid the Italian peninsula with no intent to conquer territory. It was only in 827, that year, that the actual steps were taken to conquer Sicily, and in 831, Palermo, that is Sicily, became the Muslim capital city on the island. Messina, which is in the northern part, I believe, was captured in 843, and Syracuse in 878. In their military campaigns, the Muslim invaders took control of the Straits of Messina, which we're going to see in a few. Bring this over here. They for a while held Bari and Taranto, and we'll see the map again, presenting a serious threat to Rome. And that's the idea, is that you have these two Roman empires, one in the east, one in the west, that hate each other. And now the Eastern Roman Empire has a foothold, not more than a foothold, in the Roman Peninsula. In 846, Rome was invaded and a number of churches were looted. It was only toward the end of the century, the 895 to 896, that a peace treaty was signed between Byzantium and the Muslims. Sicily was ceded to the Muslims. Now, as you think about Sicily, this is this island down in the middle of very, very difficult terrain, and invaded and perverted in a bajillion different ways. At first, the island was dependent upon Tunisia. But when Tunisia was conquered by the Fatimids, maybe it's called Fatimids, it became part of the Fatimid Caliphate. So in other words, it's another group of Muslims. After Cairo became the capital of the Fatimid dynasty, so now we see that the Fatimids actually came from Egypt, or that was the center of where they came from, and they spread across northern Africa. Their influence on Sicily slackened, and the island was ruled by a local family. So we get some idea of what was going on at that time. So he said the largest community of Jews on the island was at Palermo, where the Jewish quarter was located outside the city walls, which in those times was a dangerous place. It was first mentioned in 967 and was probably the residence of the judge Mazaliah ben Eliyahu al-Barak, believed to be the teacher of the celebrated Talmudist Nathan ben Yechiel of Rome. So these are different names that he's bringing out to us just to make it personal, that we understand that the tradition of the Jews was nurtured in different places. In 1030 that year, 2 Spanish Jews, HAIM and his son Nissim, assisted the Jews of Sicily. And you see this is a note that he has, apparently has a reference to this. He wants to give us some idea of the sequence of Jewish life. The Jews, by obtaining tax reductions and protection for Jewish merchants who traded with Sicilians. The Jews of Palermo wrote to the rabbis of Kairouan about the activities of HAIM and Nissim. A Spanish Jew named Moses served at the court of the ruler of Sicily, Tzamtzam al-Dula, and accompanied the latter on his journey to Egypt. So these are different documents that he has discovered that give us a little taste of what was actually Jewish life. The Jews of southern Italy engaged in cloth dyeing and silk weaving. Many were also farmers. Otranto and Bari, we'll look at those places when we get to the next year, were Torah centers and renowned for their scholarship. How about that? Otranto and Bari, the places of learning Torah. Evidence of knowledge of Jewish tradition by the Jews of southern Italy can be found in contemporary tombstones engraved in Hebrew. Historical evidence from northern Italy indicates the existence of small Jewish communities. These communities were located chiefly in small and medium-sized towns. Now he brings us some of these names. Now, if you listen to any of the shiurim that we give over here in the Sifra Ditzniuta, the really deeper things, these books were published in small towns in northern Italy. One of them he mentions here. He said Ferrara, Bologna, Modena, Padua, all these different names, northern Italy, and Mantua, which is called Mantoba often, Treviso, and Milan. There is further evidence that the famous Colonimus family settled in Lucca in the state of Tuscany, that is in the 9th century, and there founded a Talmudic academy. Around the year 1000, some members of the family emigrated to Mainz, which is, now we're talking about the French Rhineland or the Rhineland area, where they established themselves and founded a yeshiva. So the Jews of Tuscany were known to have owned vineyards, and their presence in Modena is, and we have, if you look for vinegar, for wine vinegar, or you look for balsamic vinegar, you're going to see that there's a vinegar over there of Modena. It's very famous for that. So, and their premise in Modena is mentioned in a document dated 1025. Venice was under the influence of Byzantium at that time, which did not like Jews, actively did not tolerate Jews, and in 945 forbade her ship captains to haul Jewish cargo or carry Jewish passengers to the east. Now, this sounds somewhat familiar? We're living in the United States right now, and everything's good here. I mean, there's threats all around us, as usual, but it's good here. Louis II, grandson of Charlemagne, in 855 ordered the expulsion of Italian Jews from the territories he ruled, but he writes that, BEINART writes, but it is doubtful whether the decree was ever implemented. Under church pressure, these kind of acts were promulgated, but sometimes they didn't take effect. In 850, the church council at Ticino forbade the employment of Jews as tax collectors and or as arbitrators. I guess arbiters means lawyers or legal between Jews and Christians. And in Verona, Bishop Rotharius repeated the allegations of Agobard of Lyons against the Jews. So here you see the church involved in strictly going after the Jews. Italy was a repository of Jewish traditions and customs and served as a bridge for Jews who passed from the Holy Land mainly into the Holy Roman Empire through Sicily and from there to Egypt and to Byzantium. That's the shir here. This is Baruch Fleischman. I'm at the Tikkun Elevator Kola.